Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. This is Dave Meltzer with the incredible Blaine Bartlett. I think he's in London, if that's
I
not
am in London today. Yes.
very good. Well, keep your eyes out, Blaine. I just want to tell you before we get started that, as you know, Office Hours is on Bloomberg and Apple TV and at the airports and hotel rooms. But I guess with all the travel going on, the airports, those are Nielsen rated shows. And we had 11 yesterday, 11 million views, which was not a bad day for Office Hours.
That's
Considering
not a bad day. Yeah.
Blaine and I created this show to help entrepreneurs by bringing on the billionaires, millionaires, and entrepreneurs to help give their best advice and insight into what's going on today. And I think aligned with the great success comes people like Rick Sanchez, who's joining us today, Chief Executive Officer of Agua Media. And, I really haven't taken the perspective, Rick, of, media and how it's, affected certain institutions. And I think Blaine and I have this discussion all the time with the accelerated pace of change. There's always change, but with the accelerated pace of change, our most foundational institutions are having the most difficult times. Our political institutions, our financial institutions. I particularly am interested, as Blaine, in two other institutions: our health and our education, which historically, haven't been placed in a priority where I think they should be. But with you, understanding that relationship with our media in the military, especially the contractors, and of course, key political figures. And would love just a little bit of insight starting there with what's going on in the Ukraine, how this relationship has evolved. And obviously, it's changed tremendously.
Well, the numbers bear out kind of an ugly story that seems to be one that puts the media in bed with certain Raytheon type companies who need us to have enemies and vis-a-vis wars. I mean, it's that simple. If you're Raytheon, you can't make any money unless you have a place to have your bombs go off, because it does you no good to have bombs unless they go off, because that way you can't get to reproduce them, right? I mean, and these companies like Raytheon and Pratt and Whitney, and we can go on and on, essentially have undue influence on our media to make sure that we continue to make bombs and have a need for those bombs. I mean, I'm sounding, I know, as rudimentary as possible, but I think sometimes you have to, because we as Americans, we don't, it's as plain as day. All we got to do is turn on the TV, but somehow, we don't see it. Why is it that during the Sunday talk shows, these giant weapons contractors have commercials on? Like, who's going to buy a nuke, right? But we turn on the TV and then we see commercials for Raytheon and for Pratt & Whitney and for all these other big giant companies, and we're wondering, what is that? What am I supposed to go to the supermarket and find something that they make? So it makes absolutely no sense. Add to that the fact that there's a lot of interlocking going on, which, I think for those who maybe don't know, that essentially means that you have a influential person on one board that sits on another board, which has nothing to do with his particular skill set, but he's there anyway because there is an ownership right. So I'll give you an example. Somebody from one of these contractors who sits on the board of the New York Times company, or who sits on the board of the company that owns CNN. So that influence essentially sneaks in. And that's why we have a media, unlike the media I think we used to have during the Vietnam War when I was growing up, where guys like Rather and Cronkite and others would criticize the war and say to the American people, hey, this is not what it's, what we were sold here. I'm not sure this war is really working. I'm not even sure we need to be there. Instead, today, if you turn on MSNBC, if you turn on CNN, if you turn on Fox, if you read the New York Times, if you read a lot of these, whether it's a periodical or a broadcast network, it's cheerleading. It's cheerleading. I mean, we take sides on this war in Ukraine and we pose it as, can you guys believe that a country invaded another country? I mean, Batman, it's like Crime on Sunday. And anybody with half a brain is looking, guys, with all due respect, yeah, Putin's whatever. But whatever we're accusing him of doing, we've done tenfold in the last 15 years. And that's not to say I don't love my country, but we have to see it. We have to call it out, and we have to use it so we have the proper context to be able to make these decisions. So that's my speech, which essentially says, we don't see that today in the media. And I, as a Latino, as 1/20th of the population, as 20% of the population of the United States, of people whose descendants come from countries where we saw this, we see it. And which is why I always argue, and I start this company, that we as Latinos have a wider angle lens view of America. And it's a shame that it's not included as much as maybe it should be, because despite the fact that we're a fifth of the population, we're only like 2% of those who are invited to talk on those TV networks that I just mentioned a little while ago.
Before we get into actually an exploration of Agua Media, I do want to just kind of preface something here and ask a question around this. The purpose of, and it has to do with the relation, the political dynamic between media, traditional media, the fifth estate, and politics by nature is the activity of accumulating and then exercising power.
Yep.
That's basically all that politics is. And the exercise of power almost always needs to have an objective to which that power is directed. Usually it's an enemy. So there's been a co-opting that has occurred here, and I'm very interested in this because my background was, at least initially at the university, was marketing and the use of media to get a message out. I mean, all of that sort of stuff. What have you seen happening? And this is very interesting because you're, with your history in broadcast, the sublimation of the fifth estate, the deterioration of an independent voice. What has happened there that has caused that? And I watched Chain, VIP, the movie. Yeah, so Fox, is that whole migration to where it becomes a mouthpiece, a propaganda arm of a political ideal. Well, what's gone on there that has allowed that to occur? And then I want to move into Agua Media because there's an antithesis to this and there's an antidote to this that I think that Agua actually can provide. So
no, Blaine, I think you're onto something. One of them is, the obvious things are the centralization of the media. It used to be that a guy who lived in Peoria owned his own newspaper, lived in the town, loved the town, and he was tied to the newspaper, and his neighbors worked for him, and he shopped at the community, and et cetera, et cetera. Today, that guy doesn't exist. Today, his newspaper and about a swath of about another 200 newspapers are owned by one guy who could give a crap about Peoria or its stores or its people, and he lives in the French Riviera. Who the hell? Or he lives in China. I mean, for all we know. So. And the same company or person owns 400 TV stations, and everything has become so centralized. And what happens when you centralize things like that? You make them easier to control. Now you only need one guy to sit on the board of that company that owns those 200 stations, and voila, you now have controlled the message of 200 stations. I mean, duh, right? By doing that, what also happened was, and this is kind of interesting, they're able to choose people and pay them very well. I mean, Cronkite barely made a couple $100,000 a year, and he was freaking rich, right? I mean, a newspaper guy barely made as much as the guy who was his neighbor who had a carpentry company. I mean, today, you get guys like Anderson Cooper and Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. I mean, would you say something you don't necessarily believe for that amount of money?
Well, I think you misspoke too. It's millions, not thousands.
Millions, not thousands.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah. I just want to make sure everybody heard that's right. So
I really appreciate you doing that, David. But could you imagine somebody, and some of these people do actually make upwards of $20 million a year. And in the old days, they obviously didn't make that kind of money. Number three, Ratings changed everything.
Mhm.
There was a time when you did a news story based on the fact that that story was valuable and had the standards that we learned from, in my case, Eric Severide School at the School of Journalism at the University of Minnesota. Those are the standards by which we will do that story because it is a story that is legit. It's important. Today, you do a story based on how much you're going to get out of it per every 5 minutes, because the next day when you come to work, they're going to say, Mr. Sanchez, at exactly 7:05, your ratings dropped way below Fox and NBC and CBS. And if this continues, we're going to fire you. So what do?
Mhm.
You're going to go in the next day and make
gotta-
sure. So the ratings
Got to
change.
juice it. You got to juice it.
Ratings changed the game. That happened in about the 1980s, mid-1980s, when they were able to create the Nielsen system that was that specific or that efficient, I guess. And then the advent of Fox News. Roger Ailes got together with some of these think tanks, and they said, well, we've got this ideology, but we can't get it to the American people because they're going to be like, well, you guys are a bunch of rich guys. We're not going to follow you guys in this and that. So we need to create a vehicle that makes the little guys want to vote with the rich guys, and we've got to do a certain things. And obviously some of that involves some racial aspects, as we saw. So when Fox News went right, it forced CNN and MSNBC and them to go left. And now what we have is siloed television, which has created a whole bunch of problems, including one of the things that bothers me the most is that when I turn on those channels, I don't see any journalists. I see people being stars and stuff. So the people are suffering as a result of what has happened with that particular institution. That's the bad news on the terrestrial side. Now, I know where you're going, Blaine. I bet you I know what your next question is, but go ahead.
Well, and as winner of a number of Emmys, as well as, you've got 3 Peabodys as part of teams that have won the Peabodys. Your move towards the setting up of Agua as a antidote, I guess, in one sense, because I grew up with newspapers. I worked for a locally owned, one of the largest newspapers at the time in Oregon, but it was a family-owned newspaper and had been in the family for years. And then Gannett came along, and then we got Hearst, and all of a sudden, Midwest, we've got Sinclair TV and Fox as the predominant channels in the Midwest of the U.S. So, what's Agua bringing to the table? Well, that is unique and that can actually move the needle a little bit.
Well, part of my story, since we talk about entrepreneurship, is that I got together with a couple of partners, and we happen to all be Latinos, Dr. Hernandez and Dr. Aguilar, and I got together with Saul Trujillo, Saul Trujillo is an amazing human being. If you guys haven't interviewed Saul, you should. He's probably the only man in the world who is a 3-time Fortune 100 CEO in all 3 corridors of the world. Mexican American, grew up poor in Wyoming of all places, and he is one of our partners. But he's my partner in Agua Media, but he was also instrumental in something else that I'm kind of an accidental millionaire, because I started when I recently left CNN. I came to Miami and I said, I got to do something else with myself. So I got together with these folks and I started a healthcare company. And I thought there was a need in the managed care space in particular. And I'm pretty good at messaging. So I was able to help in terms of being able to garner the kind of enrollment, the kind of audience, the kind of membership that we need to grow that company. So that was about 5.5 years ago. Since then, we took it public and are now a $4.4 billion company. And I guess, my wife wanted me to get a big boat, but I decided, there's this yearning that I've always had. And that is, it bothers me as a Latino in the United States that people still have this perception of us that we just, got off the boat last week or jumped over a fence to get here yesterday, or, that we're all, that none of us speak English, that, first of all, we've been here 600 years, and that means we were here before the Pilgrims. I mean, second of all, 80% of us are U.S. citizens. Third, 95% of us speak English, that are under the age of 41, by the way.
As a first language.
Yes. So these perceptions that the Fox News and some others in the media and Hollywood have created, 37% of the characters in Hollywood who play Latinos are criminals, and something like 32%. I'm not sure about that number, but I think it's also a very high number. Are people you would describe as not successful, workers, or somebody who hasn't succeeded. They're not doctors and lawyers or white collar jobs or something. So that perception has manifested, and the reality is, we are the third fastest growing GDP in the world. If we were a country, Latinos in the United States have a faster growing GDP than the United States. Think about that for a minute. We're the 7th total GDP and the 3rd fastest growing, only behind China and India. And yet, when you turn on your TV, you don't hear that, you don't see that, and it's frustrating. And the representation isn't there. So Saul and I said, what we have to do now is create a media company just where people can understand some of these things, and where we have the ability to be able to tell these stories and not wait for somebody else to tell them for us. And that's, what we're doing. And the great thing about these opportunities, whether it's a guy like me who is a Latino or somebody else who happens to be in some niche audience or believes in some niche message, is that that's a good thing. I mean, this is a democratizing force that the media is going toward, which, adds up with what we're seeing, where the numbers of terrestrial stations are going, and the number in the podcast world and the streaming world are going, straight up.
Yep.
We want to take advantage of that, and we think it's a good thing, and we think we can help add to the conversation.
And you certainly are. I want to have you back, Rick, because I want to get into the idea of silos and how do we, create a connection. If Dr. Pimple Popper can create a silo, that she has more subscribers than my entire Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I have my heroes of the most popular sport in America 2-1 saying, "How's the pimple popping lady get more viewers than I do? What's going on, Mr. Meltzer?" I want to talk to you about understanding how we can create this connection so that we are crossing over, because I do think there is a need, absolute need for what you're doing. And for example, before I get to Master Sha, most people would know that the most watched here in Southern California 6 o'clock news is Telemundo,
right?
Because it speaks specifically. And I see, I'm on the VC side of things, and for me, one of my new missions, it used to be the black quarterback issue because Warren Moon was my partner. We've solved that now. People, they don't call them black quarterbacks; they just call them quarterbacks.
Right.
But my biggest problem now is that over 70% of the world is a minority or a woman, and yet 3% of funded businesses are minorities and women. And
exactly.
That one, we're not going to make the change unless we get the money to the people that are creating this great GP, like you said. So GMP. So we want to have you back, Rick. I got Master Sha. If you want to hang on and watch an incredible human being, Dr. and Master Sha is probably one of the most extraordinary human beings. He's going to be with Dupont and Irvin Laszlo coming up on the 16th. But he has a completely different unification methodology. But I enjoy both of you, and we're blessed to have you here. So come back and join us again.
I look so much forward to it. And good. Let's have some conversations. Maybe there's some things that I can learn from you as we start this startup, which we're really excited about as we create more.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And you should be. Great. We appreciate it, and you'll have all our support. So
God bless, guys. And by the way, talk about a gun, Warren Moon. Woo!
There you go.
Oh yeah. Ooh.
There's no one who's ever thrown a football more pretty.
Yeah,
wow.
The perfect spiral. They've actually scientifically, with that sports science, proven that Warren Moon had the tightest spiral in history. So I love science for that reason. Anyway, we have the incredible Rick Sanchez. Let's all support
the
new networks out there, the aguamedia.com. All right, let's bring on my mentor, my guru of amazing. This man is pure love and light. I know, Blaine, you know Master Sha. I know Master Sha. He is a doctor. He is a master, a Tao grandmaster, and that is an amazing capability. He also has been blessed by the universe with the greatest capabilities: a healer, a teacher, and of course, an author. New York Times, multiple New York Times bestselling author. He can be found a variety of places, but I want to talk about this idea of tapping into the source. And Dr. and Master Sha, welcome to Office Hours. It's always just love, light, and lessons when you're on.
So much for both of you. I'm very honored. On this Sunday, we call Tapping the Source. I'm very happy at Deepak Chopra, Irvin Laszlo, Dr. Rönn. We have a panel. So each one teach a half hour, then we discuss. I want the public to know I teach Dao. Thank you, David, for your introduction. You know, Lao Tzu, Dao De Jing, millions of people, billions of people know. Every university honor Lao Tzu as ancient sage, philosopher. Lao Tzu talk about the business. Now you have so many business entrepreneurs here, like David, all of you are. So therefore, Lao Tzu talk about the business. Lao Tzu talk about the, and the wisdom, especially wisdom. I want to see the Dao. What's the Dao? Dao is the ultimate source. David and how Blaine, all your team is so successful. We are in the third dimension. This is a scientist approved. Everybody know long, wide, high, third dimension. Third dimension is limited. Our wisdom is limited. Our ability is limited. We have to search here. I believe you all talk about it here now. As a business people, go to higher dimension. We have so many emotional issues, relationship, finance, health issues, that if we have perceptions, awareness for the higher wisdom, many people think I am making money. No. You're not making money. Smart person create a system. Like David, like all of you, you create a system. So like you attract the light. People say, yeah, I like this idea, great wisdom. Then people will follow you. That you have a system. You make money easy coming. You talk about business here. Then the most smart person go higher. I am the light. I am the love. I am the wealth. You have everything inside your body. Therefore, David is my friends, and thank you so much, David. Everybody knows 7 energy chakras. Spiritual healing absolutely will boost your business. We know 7 chakras. Here, heart chakra. From here, go down, third dimension, not enough. We got to develop a power and go here, crown chakra. Connect with a higher wisdom. Therefore, your wisdom, your strategies, you thinking different, you doing things different, you make a decision, you create something. That's what David told me, Master Sha, you got to maybe teach the wisdom for our business team. I'm delighted. I'm there anytime you need me. Like Deepak Chopra, Irvin Laszlo, it's a scientist. I realize my ability, my service. And, people, I give example, lawyer has breast cancer come to liver. 80% covered by liver. Liver cancer is one of the worst cancer. She went to US, everywhere, all the expert. What I did, I wrote a calligraphy here. I read the calligraphy. People say, wow, calligraphy this is stage 4 cancer. Then I just wrote the calligraphy here. I connect with the field, higher dimension. Transmission, like a wild transmission. Pull the light bulb, come to this lawyer. 2 months later, 80% cancer, a small dots. Then 9 months later, completely recovered. So this is yes.
I hate to interrupt you because I'm always on these shows limited, and I have so many questions, and I just want to clarify. As he's channeling through an amazing source, it's interesting because I always preface Master and Dr. Sha by my own belief system of it's incredible how my life has changed. And we've known each other over a decade, and I trace calligraphies every day, and people ask me, why do you do it? And I say, because it works, number one, and two, it doesn't hurt anyone. There's no risk in my tracing calligraphies, and whether it's for finances, and I know you're a healer of human dis-ease, and we put people at ease, but there's abundance in the universe. And you talked about money following me. Money follows Blaine. We don't chase it. Those for my younger years. But I want to give Blaine a chance because he is one of those people, my mentor as well, that knows how to reconcile the third dimension with the higher dimensions. And that's what you do for people, is allow us to reconcile something that we don't understand. And Blaine, I'm going to set you up for a question, because my life changed on Monday when I saw a picture of billions of galaxies. And
Yes.
Master Sha and I have worked together for over a decade. You and I have known each other for over a decade. And we talk about this limit of height, width, and length of the third dimension. If you didn't see the picture of the Webb telescope, then you are not understanding what Master Sha is talking about, what a billion galaxies mean. And as you sit there in disbelief going, oh my God, what is Dave Meltzer doing, tracing calligraphies and a higher source and tapping the source? And why would Deepak Chopra and even Irvin Laszlo get involved in one of the greatest scientists, Rulin Zhu? If you don't know who she is a physics genius. She's like the Einstein of our age. Blaine, what question do you have kind of reconciling what Master Sha is teaching?
Well, I think the word there is reconciling. It is, Max Planck famously said, we can get behind everything. We cannot seem to get behind consciousness. Consciousness is the first cause. Everything is consciousness. So, the reconciliation piece has to do with a very pragmatic. We live in a three-dimensional world, where our senses come into play. We've got, height, length, width, depth, that sort of thing. The question that I'm often posed, with clients that I work with is, how do I actually quiet my mind enough to be able to hear consciousness speaking to me in such a way that I can actually manifest in this three-dimensional plane that I find myself living on? That question gets asked more often than I can recount. So I'd love to hear, Master Sha, your perception on what that is. And I love bringing Lao Tzu into this as well. I mean, it's just, I love this.
Thank you so much. In ancient wisdom, heart houses mind and the soul. Your question is the consciousness, how can it be quiet? The key is a peaceful heart. From a peace until stillness. You can see everyday human being, blah, 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 so many thinking, but the Tao source, no thinking. They're totally peaceful. So therefore, how can we connect with them? Is open the chakra from here to here. Calligraphy, why David gets such benefit? Calligraphy is a field. When I wrote the art, the source, put the invisible love light. When you trace it, you connect. That's they just like a light. You see the light here, light up a room. The sun light up a morning, dark night. So this calligraphy is invisible source we call N dimension, highest dimension. So therefore, calligraphy is such a source power coming. This the wash away that peaceful, happy, everything change. Because time is limited. Otherwise, David and also Blaine, next time you can give me a little time. I can create a calligraphy. I can do a blessing for people.
No, we want people to go. We want people to go to July 16th. We want to, that we don't want to give up everything on our show. We want people to go 16th and see. But we will have you back for a longer show. I have different shows where we can give you a greater platform. I do want to tell people that it's not just Master Zhi Gang Sha. It is MD. He's a medical doctor of Western medicine. And the best way I describe it to my friends over all these years is, people ask me who's had the greatest impact on my personal and professional life. And I tell them that it's Dr. and Master Sha, that he has healed me in a personal, my most valuable, my health, but also my financial and my relationships. And so I couldn't think of, three non-negotiables in life to have someone, a mentor who heals you with your health, with your family, and with your finances. And it's only, Master Sha, I do it a minimum 10 minutes a day. I trace my calligraphies, and now Master Sha has taught me how to enter the field. I actually don't have to trace. I can actually enter the field after over a decade of practice. There's no doubt why he has 11 New York Times bestsellers, 25 books in total. There's so much information and years of study since he was a little boy, studying at the highest level in multiple methodologies. And if you want to transform your emotional and mental challenges in life, peace, harmony, from the biggest queens and kings and prime ministers and billionaires out there to anyone that will attend these shows. We all get the same attention and intention of love, peace, and harmony, which creates the healing power of source. And I, this is a promo show for Master Sha, so I want everyone. There's no way Master Sha can't do this in 15 minutes. So join him on July 16th. It's tappingthesource.org to join Deepak Chopra, Irvin Laszlo, Dr. Sha, and Dr. Rulin Zhu. These are the world's greatest. And that's all I have to say. I still don't understand 90% of it, but it works for me. And anything this man asks of me, I'm of service. And I know Blaine feels the same way.
Absolutely.
Master Sha, you are just a blessing to us all. Anything that I missed out that you'd like to tell anyone before I let you go?
Thank you so much. It's my great honor to serve all your people. I'm looking forward to see you. I will offer 1 hour blessing, not 5 minutes, on plus the wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sha.
Please
Thank
search
you,
it.
both of you.
I love
Thank
you.
you.
I love you. Thank you. Come back.
Love you.
July 16th, we'll be promoting it everywhere. Change your life. Spend the time with Deepak Chopra, Irvin Laszlo, and Dr. Sha. I promise you it'll be well worth your time. And what an honor we've had Rick Sanchez and Master Sha here on a Thursday morning. It's worth showing up in London for, isn't it, Blaine?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon here. Well, it's 1:30 now. So I didn't have to get up as early as you did this morning.
It's worth it. Anyway, I wish I had 6 hours with Master Sha, but
absolutely.
We'll
amazing man.
July 16th, we'll send people over there as well. So let's get on to our next phenomenal guest, the CEO and co-founder of Normative, normative.io. Kristian Rönn is that co-founder himself. Welcome to our show. It's been the highest level show, and I deal in exponentiality. I study Einstein almost every day to try to figure out how everything is compounding on itself with a consistency. And obviously, bad behavior compounds at the same rate as good behavior. The only difference is we expect instant results from good behavior. And so most people quit good behavior because they don't see a result in the time that they want. And then even more damaging is that bad behavior, we don't think ever is going to have a result because we don't see one until it's too late. And, you are on a mission to save our Earth and our climate, at least, because the time is for exponential climate action. We need to create good behaviors, and we need them to exponentially aggregate on themselves. Let me know what Normative is doing as the world's first carbon accounting engine that helps us create this exponentiality and climate resolve.
Thanks, first of all, for having me on this show, David. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. I really loved the way that you phrased it, how good and bad behavior is compounding over time. And to me, that is why climate change is so incredibly important, because the actions that we take today have ripple effects for thousands of years in the future. And, we think about the world today, 8 billion people alive, but there will be billions of people potentially alive in the future. So if we mess up the only life that we know to exist in the universe here, then we mess everything up. So I loved that way you framed things. And to answer your question, how Normative is working on this. So we are a carbon emissions accounting engine. That means that we help companies calculate the full carbon footprint, both in their own operations, but quite crucially in their value chain as well, where 90% of emissions are located. And then we give them actionable insights on concrete things that they can do and concrete things that their suppliers can do in order to reduce their emissions. And I mean, if you think about it, you have governments that go to, the COP conference annually, and I've been there plenty of times myself, but it's actually the companies within the jurisdictions of the governments that are releasing the carbon emissions. And those are the ones that you need to affect with, concrete actions for how to reduce. And that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I'm fond of saying to the business clients that I work with that the future of business is making the future its business. And when you take that framing, business taking responsibility literally for the whole of the experience of being alive on this planet, and you couple it with the true purpose of business is to uplift the experience of being alive on this planet. Yeah, if you make a profit doing that, that's going to be good. If you aren't uplifting life on the planet, you don't deserve to make a planet. Your database, this is fascinating to me. You've got scientific accuracy dialed in your emissions accountancy. What's been kind of the what's the phrase I'd use here? The algorithm that you're working with. What has been the difference that's made the difference in the way that you actually account for carbon emissions in a way that is actionable on a global basis?
That's a tremendous question. I think the main thing, and we talk about this all the time, is the concept of the accuracy gap. If you look at companies around the world, there's thousands of businesses, I think 17,000 now, that have some sort of net zero target. But a majority of them actually don't know how to track their emissions over time. So I'm kind of worried that in 10 years, you might have every single business claiming to be, carbon neutral and net zero, but we still see global emissions go up, which would be a great tragedy. And I think the reason for that tragedy would be that lack of accuracy. So the way we bridge that accuracy gap is that we put a carbon layer on top of existing data that the businesses already have. So, I mean, in order to create your financial report, you need to collect every single invoice in your business, regardless if it's, procurement of electricity or raw materials or fuel for your vehicle fleet. And we put a carbon layer on top of all of those data points. So based on what electricity you have purchased and from whom, we can calculate the carbon emissions of that. Based on your business travel or the purchase of your raw materials, we can estimate the carbon emissions of that. So we give carbon data on top of that very, very high resolution financial data that the businesses are already collecting. And the biggest source of incorrect emissions accounting today is a wrong scoping. So essentially, you take a small subset of your carbon emissions, like you might only calculate emissions for your electricity because it's easy to calculate. Sometimes it even says on your utility bill what the total emissions are, and then you kind of ignore everything else. So the biggest calculation error is actually that incompleteness of scope and not calculating your emissions for everything. And what we say, we want to calculate and estimate the emissions of every single transaction that goes into producing your profit and loss statement. So that's our philosophy, and that on the basis of that, we created Normative as the first carbon accounting engine.
Yeah, I think Normative, to analogously look at business at the biggest level that has the most significant impact, would be you're one of the big four now in the accounting firms that has even a more significant impact than an Ernst & Young or an Accenture. And it's an interesting philosophy that we're working, at least I am, very hard on financial literacy. And I think with Normative, we're really looking at a newfound accounting or a newfound literacy that needs to start being taught, which is understanding how do we, actually impact or affect change. What are some of the steps to take? And there's a big learning curve to make Normative one of the great accounting firms that becomes a standard in, as we have in financial literacy with big corporations, where we have you as the leader in that type of literacy or accounting for both big companies, small companies, and of course, individuals.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, we need this data to be actionable, which means that we need to put it on top of existing infrastructure. So for instance, if I'm a procurement manager, I should have this data at the point of decision making. If I'm, for instance, in the financial industry, and making decisions on where should I invest them and put my money, then I need that data at the point of decision making. So I think it's important to have that platform approach where you put carbon data on top of systems that people already use. So I think that's number one. But I think number two is really to utilize network effects. And that's why I talk about the value chain all the time. 90%, if you take an average business, 90% of emissions are located in the value chain, but that also creates a great opportunity for you to engage with your suppliers, engage with your customers, and spread the word, essentially saying, I'm not going to be able to go net zero if you don't go net zero, and I can work together with you to make that happen. And I think there's kind of a global north and south divide here. I mean, we have to remember that we're in this mess because of our economic development in the global north. I mean, we put us in this mess, and we can't just say to, if you're a large enterprise, tell your companies in the global south in, India or China, you have to do this and not offer anything in return. So I think that collaboration is incredibly important. And I think it's a question of climate justice almost, of saying, we are going to help you as our suppliers to finance this transition. We will make sure that you have the money you need in order to change to renewable electricity, install solar panels, switch to electrified vehicle fleet, etc., etc. So I think that question of fairness is incredibly important, and it starts with the value chain. And if you can leverage those network effects in the value chain as well. And that's also one of the reasons why we co-founded this initiative called the SME Climate Hub, that is a part of the United Nations Race to Zero campaign, as a way for these large enterprises to work together with their small business suppliers, spread all across the world, and make it actionable for them to kind of join the fight towards net zero as well.
The idea of the value chain, I love that, because David hears me talk about this all the time. Nature is probably the greatest teacher I've ever had in my life. Everything is connected in nature. There is nothing that is not symbiotically linked to something else in nature. And I also do a lot of work with healthcare professionals, hospitals, as well as physicians. And the Hippocratic Oath has always been forefront in that type of work. First, do no harm. So I'm taking this and I'm saying, to you, in terms of the value chain, if we've got an operational credo that says first, do no harm, you're going to be informing the way that we work the value chain up and down the chain. How are you proposing to the organizations at the top of that value chain, rather than just an invitation or an admonition to, help fund, the transition, that idea of we're in this together? How are you fostering that? Because it's a function of transparency, and it's also a function of invitation. How are you making that happen?
I think it's a matter of being relevant and a matter of being courageous as a business leader. If you are not a part of this transition, because this transition has to happen, this is not optional anymore. We have to do this within the next 30 years. So if you are on top of that transition, you can make sure that you stay competitive and relevant. And it's interesting. I think the climate has changed in the last few years because we have to do less and less convincing ourselves. It's actually the employees within the company that are maybe writing, the managers on Slack, like, what are we doing around climate? Or it's the investors and it's the stakeholders. And so I think there's really that, massive movement of activism at all levels that fuels this transition as well and creates that sense of urgency. But in the end of the day, I think it is about being relevant. And something else that you said that I want to pick up on, which I think was kind of beautifully said, is, as a business, you have to think about, are you providing services that are making the world a bit better? And I mean, that's what most businesses do, right? I mean, I procure, the laptop computer that I sit in front because I think that will improve my quality of life, right? So all of the things, or if I go to the supermarket and buy some stuff, that is because I want to improve my quality of life. But at the same time, you have these things that are doing the opposite. I mean, millions of people, I think 10 million people per year die from pollution per year. And then we have, the hurricanes and the forest fires. And that is like decreasing the health and the well-being and the happiness. So I think if you have that as your kind of ground pillar as a company, that I'm actually here to improve the welfare and happiness of people, then you have to think about your own product, but you need to think about your value chain and the consequences, the indirect consequences of producing those products as well. Are you producing more kind of net welfare, well-being, and happiness for future generations and current generations than on the net margin? So I think that is the way to think about it as well.
And I think you're doing a great job with it. And I think Normative will become the norm, and hopefully will be one of the big four in the accounting firms when we're talking about this type of accounting instead of financial literacy, talking about our literacy of climate control and climate impact. But there is one thing, and would love to continue the conversation. We have David waiting in the wings at another time. But in the end, just like equity inclusion, which is one of the 17 initiatives of the United Nations, we have found that the companies that are adhering to these types of practices are actually more profitable. So not only are we doing good, but those companies are doing well. And tell Cynthia I saw her walk by. I love you, Cynthia.
Yeah, I will tell her that.
Hello, Cynthia. I love you. Anyway, Kristian,
I got the opposite.
I think it's an important message that this isn't. Hi, Cynthia. This isn't do-gooders.
David just said hello.
This isn't just do-gooders. This is people who want to make money to help people and have a lot of fun. And Kristian, you're showing that with Normative. Check out normative.io. Let's all look at our new literacy and look at new accounting. This is the time for exponential climate action, and Normative is leading the way. Thank you for everything you're doing. We'll have you back as well, Kristian. Thank you.
Thanks for having
Kristian,
me.
great to meet you. I love what you're up to.
Go ahead, Dave. You can come back on. All right.
There he is.
Matt has a quick
David.
finger. We have our cleanup hitter here. He hasn't seen the incredible guest that we've had today, from Rick Sanchez, the master saw, to Kristian Rönn. But David is right up there as founder and CEO of Modus Nova. And, Blaine and I work in the neuro side of things, in neurorehabilitation, in healthcare, in studying Dr. Joe Dispenza, especially in the understanding, even with Master Sha as a healer and quantum, he's an MD and a quantum healer. The idea of how we can heal within, to me, is understanding how easy it can be, and through our technology today. And David Wu is leading the way with Modus Nova. Give us an understanding of, first of all, what neurorehabilitation is and how you've been able to bring it into the home.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us on, David, and for this opportunity. We're Modus Nova. We make robotic exoskeletons for stroke rehab, for neuro rehab. And our focus is to kind of bring access to innovation and technologies that we know will help people kind of recover their walking or their grasp or their movement after a neurological injury like a stroke or something like a TBI or some other kind of brain injury. So we're an FDA Class 1 device. We've been in about 200 clinics and hospitals all over the US. And now in about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we just launched our home version, where we're able to provide that same level of rehab that we that are in those clinics and hospitals directly into the home, and have that technology always available. We're doing everything we can. We really, at Modus Nova, we see a world where access to rehab is something that no brain injury survivor ever has to go without.
And The idea of an exoskeleton, I mean, when people begin to imagine that and without actually seeing a prototype, it, I'll just speak from my own experience. When I first would think of something like that, it seems kind of clunky. It seems like, that's not the
Yeah, yeah.
experience that you're actually producing, for people. You've actually got, as I understand, the work that you do, and with the AI integration and everything else, you've actually got a fairly streamlined way that this actually can be utilized in home, ambulatory services, in a rehab clinic, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And we spent about a decade really to develop this exoskeleton technology that was, like you said, quite clunky. I mean, we had the original prototypes, had this huge backpack you wear, this suit that you would get into, and we really streamlined that down from both the engineering and on the clinical side. We really studied what parts of that actually mattered and made a difference for survivors and stroke survivors, and getting them back their function. And it's now, it's a end effector device. So it's more like a glove or a sleeve that you put onto the hand, or a boot that you would wear around the foot. And then it's connected to, just like you said, Blaine, this AI driven console, this screen, this computer that where in rehab users play video games. We kind of trick the user, the patient, the stroke survivor, into doing their rehab as they're kind of flying a spaceship around asteroids. They're controlling that spaceship with their affected limb, with their hand or their foot that they're trying to rehab in. So rather than do a squeeze ball stretch band and they're doing 100 reps or 500 reps, they're playing Pong, they're cooking, they're doing these activities that they enjoy. But still, we're using AI. We are challenging them. We're making sure to push them to their limits to get the reps that they need to reform those brain connections and create that neuroplasticity.
Yeah. David, this is so revolutionary. But one of the most interesting aspects for me is that it's not just those people who have had strokes or have had injuries, 10 days ago in rehab. It actually, and this is fascinating to me, it could be 10 years ago, and there's very few rehabs that are, impactful, years and years later. What is the differentiator that with maybe neuroplasticity or the way the brain works, that we can rehab an injury or disease that has occurred over a decade ago?
No, that's a great question, David, and that's great insight with, like you said, an injury that we have some users that are 24 years after their brain injury, after their stroke, or after their car accident, where they're still getting incredible gains. They're starting to grasp, starting to get function back. The brain's an incredible organ, right? It's not like bones or muscles. It doesn't really heal the same way. It doesn't regrow in a matter of weeks or months. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of repetitions to create those neuroconnections. And we each do this, right? We call it neuroplasticity. It's a fancy name for learning. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? It's practice, practice, practice. From killer dance moves to riding a bicycle, something that's complex, or any Olympic athlete. It's hours, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of practice. And we're not really doing anything different than taking all of that practice that you would do with a coach, with a skilled coach, but we're encapsulating that into a portable system driven by AI that is always available in the home. So you have access to top quality care. You don't have to drive somewhere. Our medical industry has left so many behind. We know how to help them. We know how to cure them. We couldn't conceive of not giving chemotherapy to a cancer patient. We don't give the amount of hours of rehab that the science says the brain needs, the hundreds of thousands of hours of rehab, of repetitions. Somehow it's okay to deny that to our stroke survivors, our neuro injuries. And we're doing, our part in our innovation to try to take that and make that available.
Speaking about innovation, in one sense here, the focal point of your whole organization's mission is around mobility, ultimately. innovation. What, a lot of stroke, we'll just take stroke, a lot of stroke consequences can show up through speech impediment. I mean, all of a sudden loss of language skills.
Yeah.
Again, it's a neurological, screw up in the brain as a consequence of the stroke, whether it's an aneurysm or whatever it may be. Is there anything that you see on the horizon where you can begin to envision something, that Modus Nova could actually be implementing that would begin to affect speech pathologies? As a consequence of, as a rehabilitative structure, it's not mobility, but you're actually rewiring, reconnecting synaptically, the neural structure of the brain.
No, absolutely, Blaine. That's a great question. And as you mentioned, stroke affects so many people. It's the #1 cause of adult disability. Every 40 seconds in the U.S., there's a new stroke. There's a new stroke survivor. It affects about 7 million Americans, about 800,000 new cases every year. And as part of that, in addition to the movement, a lot of that we treat, there is that speech, there's vision, all the senses. There's even personality changes, all the crazy things that our brain does. That then, when that system gets damaged, we'll need to do rehab for. We really see that the first step is to put robotics into the home. That would make that a platform. Because right now, and there are great speech pathologists that can help stroke survivors get better. There are great physical therapists, occupational therapists. It's just that we don't have the labor to help all of these stroke survivors with the help, to get the treatment that they need. We need some kind of robotic device. We really think of ourselves as a labor force multiplier, where then a speech pathologist or a physical therapist, or using our AI, can really kind of multiply the amount of care that we can give. We're starting with mobility. We already have the tools. We have the screen, we have the microphone, we have the speakers. We can do speech as well. The thing about innovation, especially in the medical field, there are so many walls. There's so many barriers to a new treatment, a new device. We're really focused on getting people back, their walking, their movement. And then we really see that as not the end, but the beginning, the first steps to making rehab from speech to vision to mobility available for all. And not just in the US, certainly we want to help the entire world as well. But for a small company like us, for a startup, it's one step at a time.
Beautiful.
No pun intended. And you are helping people one step at a time. Practice, practice, practice. Founder and CEO of Modus Nova, changing the world, David Wu. Thank you so much for all you do. We appreciate it. And look forward to seeing the advancements and getting one of these in every home that needs it. And I love the analogy to chemotherapy. So check out Modus Nova. Let's give them our support with the greatest of healthcare technology. We appreciate you. Come back and visit us soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Great to meet you.
All right, Blaine.
Oh, what a show.
This shows you, I guess those 11 million viewers yesterday at the airports alone know what we're doing, because we got some extraordinary guests here, and this is one of my favorites. I mean, we're talking about world changers, 4 of them, in varying fields, varying degrees, and varying things. But I mean, we loaded it in. I was like, whoa,
we did.
What's your takeaway from these superstars?
When you and I started this show, we originally titled it The Soul of Business, Office Hours, the Soul of Business version. And I think everything that we talked about today speaks in some way, shape, or form to the soul of business. Yeah. And kind of going back to the purpose of business is to uplift the experience of being alive on the planet. And if I'm doing that well, I'm going to be actually making a profit, because I need to make a profit to stay in business. But the idea of innovation, the idea of being able to, Master Sha, quiet my heart enough to listen to the spirit as it moves to and through me. Everything has been created that has ever been created or ever will be created. It hasn't been manifested, and it's a question of manifestation. And you and I both work with that all of the time. So my takeaway here today has to do with just a reinforcement of the purpose of business in its truest form, is to uplift the experience of being alive on this planet. And if we're doing it through robotics, if we're doing it through media, if we're doing it, through just about any mechanism that we can think of, if we're doing it well, we're going to be making a difference. Climate change, is a consequence of business's activities. Yeah. So we need to, charge business with turning that ship around. Politicians aren't going to do it. Yeah, that's just not going to work. There's too much money involved in turning that ship of state around. Business getting in front of that will make the difference. And this would be the admonition. It's not just my takeaway, but it's an admonition. If you're a listener and you're watching this and you're running a business or you're in a business, which by definition is just about every single one on this planet, be sure what you're doing is first to do no harm.
Yeah, I love that. And my takeaway actually came from your quote, which is applicable to Rick Sanchez, of course, to Master Sha, to our friend David Wu and Kristian Rönn. And it's the idea of the future of business is making the future your business. And it's another, just extraordinary lesson that you teach, and it's your quote, but the future of business is making the future your business. And all of our extraordinary guests today are making the future of all of us their business to make it better, as you suggest. So really powerful quote and idea and lesson from you, Blaine, that's applicable. And that's absolutely my takeaway of the day. Go enjoy London. Go raise money for Unstoppable Foundation. Please, as chairman, board member, and the founder, Cynthia, who joined us with a quick cameo. That's the way that Snoop Dogg does is, they do these big sports concerts and Snoop Dogg's playing. That's basically what he does. He walks on stage and then walks off, and everybody's like, "Oh, what happened? What's up, Snoop?" So tell Cynthia that I think she's like Snoop Dogg. She makes those quick appearances.
Oh, she'll love that.
Support. Thank you so much, Blaine. Thank you, all of our guests. We'll see you next week, my friend, and have a safe trip home.
You bet, buddy. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. The great Blaine Bartlett, BlaineBartlett.com. For all you business owners, one of the things that I want you to reach out to me on is ERC. Forgot to ask Blaine if he's applied for it, but the employee retention credit, 80% of all small business owners have money coming to you, $26,000 per employee that you've retained. And so email me to apply. Take advantage of it, David@dmeltzer.com. I'd be more than happy to help you get what you have already been paying into and deserve. So ERC, if you know a small business owner, have them email me. It's about $26,000 an employee. Most companies are getting an average of $225,000. It's no joke. So email me, David@dmeltzer.com. We'll be filming office hours. No, we won't. We'll be filming 2-minute drill season 4 today. We are super excited. The team, we're taking it to the next level. The audience is at the next level. The shows are at the next level. Most importantly, everyone, be more interested than interesting. Be kind to your future self and do good deeds. We'll see you tomorrow.